Hi and welcome to this episode, which is the first entry of the second era of my fictional history, the Classic Age. I've made a few adjustments to the format of these videos to hopefully make them more interesting and enjoyable. Firstly, from this episode onwards, I will include little tutorial snippets on different aspects of my creative process. I will still work on larger tutorials on map making and other things, and the next one should be ready by the end of this second era, but they will have more of a holistic bootcamp character, while I want to use the world-building entries to give you a glimpse into what I'm experimenting with at the time. Secondly, now that I move on to the second era, there will be a history of information from past entries that many ideas will naturally refer back to, which I, however, don't want to put into the center of these episodes, because I want them to be understandable for people who are new to this. I still think that the interconnections between different cultures and eras are an interesting and important part of my world-building. Therefore, I will from now on add a comment to each video to explore what implications new ideas have on past creations and vice versa. So for instance, under this video you will find a comment on the relation between Mehâshan culture, which will be the topic of this video, and their predecessor culture from Kushumer, which I explored in a past entry. Lastly, I have expanded a bit on my world-building premise. I will still rely on a single premise, but I am treating myself for a little update for each era. So here's the updated premise. Of all wonders of this world, the Peetorisi are certainly the most wondrous. A Peetora is a naturally occurring, tree-sized spire, a natural menhir of sorts. Peetorisi consist of a very dense and resistant material, and they are immensely old, taking generations to form. In their inner grows a pelai, a strange object with an appearance akin to an enlarged, twisted almond. Upon touching one of these so-called fruits of the Peetora, a person will imprint the compound impression of what it is like to be them in this very moment into the pelai. So if you were to touch a pelai, you would write all your feelings, not only the ones fleeting over the surface, but your deeper moods, the sentiments that tell you how you feel in your life overall into it. However, reading and writing from these artifacts is the same process, so that if another person wanted to read what you had just written onto the object, they would inevitably have to record their own impressions on it, creating a complex mix of both sentimental worlds. Owing to these properties, the Pelaisi have been utilized in various ways by different cultures to communicate their emotional experiences across different groups and time periods. A pelai can be carved and broken into fragments, and while this will weaken it, the resulting fragments and dust will still inhibit its original properties. While the pelai remains inside the Peetora, the environment around the structure is reactive to the states of mind of those who dwell in its vicinity, and those who approach it will perceive strange and subtle phenomena that are described as soft sounds, as if the air came alive, or as a glowing of the world, as a soft emotional vibrance. These effects are diffuse, much more subtle, and of a different quality when compared to those of a pelai. A Peetora can be covered with thick and dense surfaces without losing its reactiveness, so many cultures have built structures around them, often shrines. Peetorisi change their color once they have reached maturity. Once this shift encompasses the entire structure, cracks appear on its surface, and after a while it incinerates spontaneously, producing an intense spectacle with aurora-like perceptions and collective emotional experiences. And these events have been celebrated in various ways by different cultures. After some time, the Peetora will renew and begin a new life cycle, healing what damages it has suffered. To harvest a pelai from a Peetora, the structure must be cracked open. In most instances, the Peetora will die consequently. In some cases, however, returning a fragment or dust of the removed pelai and adding high amounts of heat will incinerate the Peetora so that it will regenerate. Should this attempt fail, the Peetora will remain behind as a cold object, and as probability demands, in later days only a small number of these strange objects are intact and alive, making a pure pelai, one without any impressions recorded onto it, a rarity of unrivaled worth. That's the updated premise. It is meant to clarify the origin of the Pelaisi while hopefully making them no less mysterious and interesting. If you are curious about the implications of this update on the previously created cultures, you can find a comment below their respective videos, where I explored that question in more detail. And with that, we're ready to dive into the second era, beginning with the Mehâshan Empire. The Mehâshan realm was founded as a union of different ethnic groups, tribes, and city-states along the coast of Bereshan. united by the ruler of Isrea, the Enudaha. It was a realm founded on belief, a belief the scholars call Esha Kore. It centered around the two fundamental forces of Eshara and Zele. Eshara was the force that lets everything be what it is, that gives it its essence, while Zele was an active counterpart to disturb and dilute it, to break the boundaries between things, between truth and lie, being and non-being, right and wrong. The Mehâshan saw the cosmos of all beings as a zone of conflict between the two, and higher beings could perceive and identify these forces in emotion and thought, and they could affirm or negate them. Affirming them meant to become a vessel for Eshara, devoting oneself to one's function and consciously choosing to be who one is. Through the Pelaisi, human beings could move from being isolated vessels to one collective vessel, a dominion of truth in the world. To the Mehâshani, everyone truly was who she was only in the community, and a famous verse cites, "Only under the rule of Eshara are we truly ourselves." The Mehâshan thought of their society as the dominion of Eshara, Meheshara in their language, and they saw their society as a vessel that must be strong to hold these forces lest they disperse and make room for Zele, the forces of chaos or forgetting. Mehâshani society knew two distinct spiritual elites that sought to turn society in a strong vessel for Eshara, and they were spoken of as the white and black robes, for these they wore on special occasions. The white robes were the wardens of Eshara, and we can think of them as guides that supported people in becoming what they are and reaching clarity of purpose, and the most important part of this function was to oversee the adoption of social roles in work, marriage, education, or the military. On these occasions, be it someone's initiation to a profession or a wedding ceremony, the wardens would lead rituals as part of which the individuals ascending to their social role would leave their imprint on the Pillai. The purpose of this ritual was to fill the Pillaisi with the essence of all people. They were icons of truth that were meant to be stored and returned to shrines built around the Peyatoresi. These were used as ceremonial keepsakes, where the Pillaisi would rest as the hearts in the body of Eshara, and this established the dominion of truth in the world. We can think of it as a collective demonstration of moral perfection concerted by the wardens of Eshara, as a continuous effort to prove worthy of the great worldly power the rulers of Mehâshan amassed over time. The shrines of Eshara built around the Peyatoresi also formed the center of bureaucratic districts, and thus established the administrative order of the realm as material and spiritual pillars of Meheshara. During the initiation ritual, the wardens would not only remind the initiated to follow the ways of Eshara, these included truthfulness, clarity, calmness of mind, and devotion, but they would also give them a token, a shard of a vessel as a symbol for their function in the great vessel of Meheshara. And while the warden carried the community's Pillai back to its storage inside the Peyatora, the initiated carried their tokens home, where they would be embedded inside a family altar made from the initiation tokens that resembled a Peyatora, and thus likewise formed a pillar of the realm. Most social roles were thus embedded in Meheshara, and many different tokens existed with different ranks and variations. For a wedding, no new tokens would be issued by the wardens. Instead, the bride's and husband's tokens were exchanged as a union of the two families, so one's token impacted the other's family's reputation quite directly in front of guests of the house. The second spiritual elite, the black robes, were concerned with a different yet related purpose. They were known as the devourers of Zele, and they were trained in different mystic practices to purify disturbed Pillaisi. The reason is that the Mehâshani realm was born out of the turmoil of the Sharizal, the great calamity that upended the great realms of Old and Mentrine, and this meant that most Pillaisi harbored an echo of immense pain and fury. This, to the Mehâshani, was the imprint of Zele. Thus the Devourers functioned as vessels of chaos that interacted with the Pillai for very long amounts of time to restore it for use in Meheshara. I do not know what this meant for the life of a Devourer. I imagine them as a strange caste, ever in pursuit of ways to triumph over madness and pain. I believe that they originated as a shamanic community, for I know that some of the old shamans would clean a Pillai after a dry period to free it from the vices of the people. But a lot of mysteries surround these people, and they lived in remote monasteries. We must imagine Mehâshan as a splittered realm of city-states, small kingdoms and tribes, and the different territories had different organizations, with regions and some few bureaucratic envoys sent by the Enudaha as shared elements. It was forged by a union of nomadic desert tribes and city-states who cooperated for trade caravans and war, where the nomads offered protection and guidance. These groups, however, remained culturally distinct. For instance, the nomads had no family altar, but wore their tokens as necklaces or kept them in their saddles. The central event to unite the realm was the ascension of a new Enudaha, the ruler over Meheshara, and this was seen as a grand renewal of the realm itself. With the death of an Enudaha, the wardens carried the Pelaisi of all the shrines of Eshara to a living Peyatora that was designated by the new Enudaha. The Peyatora would then be harvested in the name of the new Enudaha, and the late ruler would be burned with his estate as a purification of Meheshara to incinerate the Peyatora. Then prayers were spoken for the Peyatora's rebirth. If it regrew, Meheshara was renewed successfully, and there was trust in the successor as true ruler of Meheshara. Customs such as this may seem strange to us now, and Mehâshan may seem to us as just one empire among many, but we have to understand the significance of the return to order its rise resembled in a profound sense. It is said even that some areas asked to be incorporated into the realm, as a rescue from the persistent turmoil caused by the Sharesal, and in some places the wardens of Eshara arrived before the troops, turning Peyatorisi into shrines of Eshara, into pillars of an order stretching heaven and earth.